Alright, and welcome back. This video I'm going to be working on the fairings for both the elevators and the rudder itself. It's kind of a new experience working with the fiberglass. The pieces that come with the kit are pretty decent as far as how they're made and whatnot. The instructions talk about truing up the corners, the edges of each of the fiberglass pieces to make sure that it's basically a perfect right angle to where it meets up with the skin. I kind of glazed over that step when I started working on these tips. These are a couple pages into this section, and I was just looking for things to work on while I was waiting on some parts. So I started installing this, and I didn't true it up. And it talks about using either a cutting tool or something just to get an edge, maybe a sanding bit, something like that. And but I noticed that it wasn't that big of a deal. I'm gonna have to glass the joint anyway, as far as I can tell anyway, because where the skins double up over the counterbalance section there, it's about three skins thick, so to say, and so it doesn't line up perfectly with the fiberglass fairing anyway. And just to get that smooth look, I was planning on kind of putting a layer of glass over the joint and then sanding it down anyways to make it a good seamless transition there. So I wasn't exactly, too terribly worried that it was a perfect angle or not. But anyway, you line everything up, match drill the size 40 holes with the holes that are already in the skins. And then once you cleco it, as you can see, what I'm doing here is you final size everything to a size 30 for the rivets, the pop rivets you're going to end up using. And they're the flush mount style pop rivets. I don't think that I had any real issues putting this together. Everything fit in fairly well. Now, the one piece that I talked about at the last video, the trailing edge, that was the only issue that I ran into, and that was because I didn't read the instructions correctly, and I messed up the trailing edge itself. So I redid that and reinstalled it, and it turned out just fine. And then you cut out the very back end of the fairings there so that it goes around the trailing edge piece. And then the rest of it's pretty simple. Just dress everything up, fit everything to make sure that the fairing is sitting inside of the skins far enough and the seam matches up, and then you put it all together. So now that I've got the holes all final size to a size 30, you see here is I am countersinking the holes on the fairing. Now I didn't want to use the countersink guard or whatever you call it, because I didn't want to use a drill. So I'm just doing this by hand. It's fiberglass, so it's easy enough. But that way I have a little more control of how deep the countersink goes in, at least in my opinion. So what I would do is I would just countersink it, take the rivet and test it just to make sure it's sat flush. And then once everything was good, set it in there, and now I'm in the process of getting ready to pop rivet the fairing onto the elevator. These are I believe it's the CS4-4 pop rivets. They're kind of larger pop rivets. There was a couple where it actually broke the rod, for lack of a better term, from the pop rivet about halfway up the shaft, and so I actually had to cut it, and now I'm gonna have to go back and sand it down. But for the most part, wasn't very difficult. Just like I said, just a matter of making sure everything lines up and trying to make sure that the rivet pulls the fairing close and tight to the skin, and it did. It wasn't any, like I said, it wasn't any issues with this. Now I have the tail cone with everything assembled. I have it on the two sawhorses in the middle supporting the body of the tail cone, but then also you can see this U-Haul box. I have one on either side that's supporting the horizontal stabilizer just to make sure it doesn't tip over one way or the other. As I've discussed before, I'm going to end up putting this in my front room, and I'm kind of debating if I want to put it all together while it's in the front room and have it as a single piece, or just hang everything up on the walls. I'll probably hang everything up on the walls except for the tail cone. It'll sit on a stand in the front room. So now working on the other side, doing all the exact same thing. Match drilled everything to the size 40. Now I'm final size drilling everything to the size 30 in preparation for pop rivets. Like I said, the elevators actually, they were pretty easy. The fairings on these were not difficult at all. The rudder, that's a bit of a different story. It's a little more involved, at least in my opinion. Especially when you start working on the bottom rudder fairing, and that'll be probably the next video. I'll get that and talk about that some more. But the elevator ones, it's just a matter of getting everything set in place, matching the trailing edge of the fairing to the trailing edge of the elevator, and just getting everything lined up. Now, I've seen several pictures in forums discussions about matching this fairing with the leading edge fairing that's attached to the horizontal stabilizer, and same thing for the vertical stabilizer and the fairings that are attached to the rudder, and trying to get that line to match up. I'm expecting that I'll probably have to do some glass work to get those to line up correctly, and that's something that I don't have any experience with, so I'll have to kind of look into the better way of doing fiberglass. You don't want to add a whole lot of weight, obviously, but I want to have everything look decent and look, that like the line is meant to be the way it is. And so that's the next part of this section deals with putting those leading edge fairings on and fiberglassing everything together to make it work right. Here you see me dimpling the skins, getting ready to put the fairing in place. But that might be something that I go out and buy some fiberglass and some resin and practice on. I've done fiberglass work once before, way back in high school, 20 or 30 years ago, and I remember it wasn't too terrible, but I also wasn't concerned with weight, so I think we just added globs and globs of resin to make it look good. So I'll have to work on that just to make sure, like I said, the weight being a concern. So these, like I said, these turned out pretty well. The seams were not too terribly off, and like I said, once I get the fiberglass over the seams, I think it'll smooth out really well and it'll blend really well. So I was pretty impressed with them. In the next video, I'll start working on the rudder, and we'll see how that goes. I'm gonna go ahead and let this trail off here. And again, thanks for watching these videos, and we'll see you next time around.